Everyone around him laughed. They walked past, they shook their heads, they pulled out phones and filmed him like he was a punchline worth keeping. A black man in a worn army jacket, on his knees in a vacant lot in the pouring rain, stretching garbage bags over a frame of salvaged sticks with the calm, deliberate focus of someone who had done this 1,000 times before and would do it 1,000 times again. They couldn't see what he was building, they just saw what he was using. And they laughed. What happened over the next 47 days of relentless, bone-soaking, merciless rain would silence every single one of them. Because while their expensive tents flooded and their so-called weatherproof gear collapsed under the weight of real weather, his shelter, built from what the rest of the world throws away, stayed bone dry every single night. His name in this story is Marcus, and Marcus was not a man the world had been kind to. He was 53 years old, had been unsheltered for going on 2 years, and had learned the hard way, the wet way, the nearly dead way, that the gap between sleeping dry and sleeping in a soaked sleeping bag at 42 degrees is not a gap you survive twice without respect. He had watched men he knew get pulled out of flooded tents in body bags. He had felt his own body temperature drop until thinking became something that happened to other people. He knew what cold and wet together could do to a human body in a way that most people only know from textbooks, if they know it at all. So, when the skies opened up that October in a West Coast city already battered by early season storms, Marcus did not panic. He did not line up for a shelter bed that wasn't available. He went to the dumpsters behind the hardware store on the edge of the industrial corridor, and he got to work. He pulled out 6 55-gallon contractor bags, black, thick, 3 millimeters each. He gathered a bundle of scavenged PVC conduit pipe, the kind electricians leave behind in offcuts. He found a torn cargo net in another bin. And he spent 4 hours in the drizzle building, something that would outlast every commercial tent in that vacant lot by a margin that should embarrass every product engineer in the outdoor industry. Here is the question that haunts this story. How did a man with nothing build something that worked better than products that cost hundreds of dollars? What did Marcus understand that the companies selling you Gore-Tex and carbon poles and clip-in ventilation systems have spent decades making sure you never figure out? Before we go any further, I want to hear from you. Have you ever bought expensive outdoor gear, a camping tent, an emergency preparedness kit, and had it fail you in exactly the moment you needed it most? Drop that story in the comments below, because what you are about to discover will fundamentally change how you think about waterproofing, shelter, and what the word premium actually means when the rain doesn't stop. And if this is already landing differently than you expected, go ahead and hit that like button. It tells us this is exactly the kind of truth you want more of. Let's talk about the modern tent industry for a second. Walk into any outdoor retailer and you are looking at a wall of products that start at $80 and climb past $1,000 without blinking. The labels promise everything: hydrostatic head ratings, taped seams, proprietary waterproof coatings with names that sound like pharmaceutical drugs. 1,500 HH, 3,000 HH, 10,000 HH. The higher the number, the more you pay. The more you pay, the drier you stay. That is the deal. That is the contract they are selling you. Except that is not quite what happens, is it? Most budget tents and plenty of mid-range ones use a polyurethane coating applied over a nylon or polyester fabric. It is a film so thin it begins to delaminate within a season or two of real use. UV exposure breaks down the polymer bonds in the coating. Repeated folding creates stress fractures along the crease lines. The seams, even the taped ones, develop microscopic breaches at every point where the sewing needle punctured the fabric, because the tape adhesive that is supposed to seal those holes is itself subject to heat cycling and age. The rain fly works as advertised for the first night. By the third night of continuous rain, the coating is saturated, the seam tape is lifting at the edges, and the floor is a puddle you are sleeping in. You wake up soaked, and you tell yourself you did not pitch it right. You blame yourself. You go online and read about seam sealer and waterproofing spray and you buy more products. That is exactly what they are counting on. Meanwhile, a garbage bag, dismissed, laughed at, literally manufactured to be thrown away, is made of something that does not work that way at all. Here is where it gets remarkable. Pay attention here, because this is the part nobody in the outdoor industry will ever put in a brochure. Garbage bags are made of polyethylene. Specifically, most heavy-duty contractor bags are made from low-density polyethylene, LDPE, and increasingly from LLDPE, linear low-density polyethylene, which is a modified version with dramatically superior tear and puncture resistance at the same wall thickness. Polyethylene is one of the simplest polymers in existence. Long, repeating chains of carbon and hydrogen atoms, bonded tightly together with no side groups, no gaps, and no pores, nothing. The molecular structure is essentially a continuous wall. Think of it this way. Most waterproof coatings work by trying to close the holes in a fabric that was, by its very nature, designed to breathe. It is like trying to waterproof a window screen by spraying it with something. You can slow water down. You can raise its resistance for a while, but you cannot permanently eliminate the openings that are built into the weave of the material from the moment it is made. Polyethylene does not have this problem because polyethylene was never a fabric. There are no holes. Water molecules approach a sheet of intact polyethylene and find nothing. No gap, no channel, no invitation to enter. The water sits on the surface. It runs off, every drop, without exception, for as long as the material stays physically intact. Engineers who design emergency shelter systems for disaster response understand this completely. The International Federation of Red Cross specifies polyethylene sheeting as its primary waterproofing material in emergency shelter kits deployed to flood zones and earthquake sites around the world. Not Gore-Tex, not coated nylon, polyethylene. Because it works absolutely, predictably, and at a cost that allows it to be deployed at scale. When civilization is in pieces and people need to stay dry tonight, the material experts reach for is the same material that passes your house in a garbage truck every week. Marcus knew this too, not from a materials science course, from sleeping in the rain. Now, here is where it gets worse, or better, depending on how angry you feel when someone finally tells you the truth. The critical variable in any improvised polyethylene shelter is not the material itself. The material is already perfect. The critical variable is geometry. This is the engineering insight that separates a shelter that saves your life from one that collapses on top of you. And it is what Marcus had worked out through years of field testing that no product engineer has ever had to do, because no product engineer has ever had their life depend on getting it right. Slope, pitch, angle of deflection. These are the only words that matter once you have your polyethylene in hand. Water is obedient. It goes exactly where gravity instructs it to go. A sheet of polyethylene laid flat does not deflect water. It collects it. And water is heavier than it appears. A few liters pooling at the center of a flat plastic sheet creates enough downward pressure to bow the entire structure inward, crack the anchor points at the perimeter, and bring the whole thing down in a single catastrophic collapse. This is why improvised shelters fail, not because the material was wrong, because the geometry was wrong. The water was given permission to pool and it took it. Marcus ran his frame at a 40-degree pitch on both sides, a steep, confident ridge that gave water no time to consider its options. 40 degrees means water hits the surface and immediately begins moving toward the edge. It does not linger. It does not pool. It traces a fast, decisive line from the peak to the drip edge in under a second and falls clear of the base of the structure. Gravity becomes the entire waterproofing system. The polyethylene is just the surface gravity works on. He overlapped his sheets like roof shingles, upper sheet placed over lower sheet, never the reverse, with no less than 6 inches of overlap at every seam. This detail sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the difference between a roof and a funnel. Water moving down a pitched surface follows whatever it is touching. If a seam opens upward into the flow, the water finds it and enters. If the seam opens downward, water crosses it and continues to the ground without ever knowing the gap existed. This is how every functional roof built by every civilization in human history has worked. Every clay tile, every wooden shingle, every sheet of corrugated iron on every farmhouse, on every continent. Marcus had never read a roofing manual. He had watched rain fall on surfaces long enough to understand what it does, which turns out to be a better education. And then he solved the problem that the outdoor industry still has not adequately solved, even in $1,000 tents: condensation. Here is the truth that kills people in improvised shelters, and that premium outdoor brands mention in small print if they mention it at all. Polyethylene is a vapor barrier. That is its greatest strength. It is also its most dangerous characteristic if you do not understand it. Your body produces heat and moisture continuously, through every breath you exhale, through your skin, through the simple metabolic fact of being alive. In a fully enclosed polyethylene shelter with no ventilation pathway, that moisture has nowhere to go. It rises, hits the cold inner surface of the shelter wall, condenses back into liquid water, and rains back down on you. Not from the sky, from your own body. Or you wake up soaked from the inside. Your sleeping bag is wet, your clothes are wet, and your core temperature drops just as fast from internal condensation as it would from a tent failure in the rain. Because wet insulation is not insulation, it is dead weight. Marcus solved this with 2 modifications that cost him nothing. First, he left a 4-inch gap running the full length of each base wall, low enough to be below his sleeping level, high enough to allow cold air to circulate along the ground and carry moisture out before it accumulated. The gap created passive ventilation without creating a wind channel that would rob the shelter of warmth. Second, he slept on a raised platform of salvaged wood pallets covered with an additional layer of plastic sheeting, creating a vapor barrier between his body and the ground. A cold earth wicks heat and moisture upward through anything porous. The plastic stopped it completely. He also built the shelter in 2 layers, an outer shell of contractor bags pitched at 40 degrees for water deflection, and an inner layer of bags suspended a few inches inside, creating a dead air cavity between them. Dead air does not conduct heat. It is the same principle that makes a double-pane window dramatically more insulating than a single pane, or that makes a down sleeping bag warm. The loft traps still air, and still air is one of the best natural insulators that exists. Marcus had engineered a double-membrane shelter with passive ventilation and a ground vapor barrier for materials the rest of the world had already thrown away. Over those 47 days, every commercial tent in that vacant lot flooded or structurally failed at least once. His did not move. If you are finding this genuinely useful, and I think you are, hit that like button now. We are not done yet, so why does nobody teach this? Why does every survival guide, every outdoor retailer, every emergency preparedness pamphlet route you toward expensive specialized products when a $2 contractor bag, applied with knowledge, outperforms gear that costs 50 times as much? The answer is 3 things. And once you see all 3, the whole system becomes transparent. First, speed. Doing what Marcus did requires knowledge. It requires understanding pitch angles and seam direction and vapor dynamics and anchor methods that preserve the material's integrity. That knowledge cannot be pre-packaged. It cannot be clipped onto a stuff sack or printed on a hang tag. Industry does not profit from knowledge that lives in someone's head. Industry profits from products that replace knowledge, objects you buy because you do not have to understand anything to use them. A tent you can pitch in 7 minutes replaces skills that took Marcus years to develop under real conditions. That replacement is not a convenience, it is a business model. And knowledge that cannot be sold is knowledge that never gets promoted. Second, cost. A 55-gallon contractor bag costs between $1 and $2. A pack of 10 run about 15. There is no margin in that. There is no retail markup, no influencer partnership, No sponsored content budget, no trade show booth that a $2 solution can sustain. The outdoor industry is not built to sell you what works cheapest. It is built to sell you what works expensively enough to support a commercial ecosystem. Every product on that retailer's wall represents a supply chain, a marketing spend, a retail relationship, and a return on investment that has to justify itself quarter after quarter. A garbage bag represents none of those things, so it sits in the cleaning supplies aisle, invisible, while the industry sells you coated nylon at $200 a unit and calls it innovation. Third, and this is the one that should make you stop and sit with it for a moment, perception. Garbage bags are associated with garbage, with waste, with poverty, with the people our culture has systematically decided not to see. The moment a material becomes associated with the population society has discarded, we lose the ability to evaluate that material on its own merits. We stop seeing polyethylene. We see a homeless person. We see a punchline. We see something to film and walk past. And in doing so, we miss the engineering happening right in front of us. Here is the part that should make you quietly furious. The Red Cross deploys polyethylene sheeting into disaster zones on every continent. FEMA recommends 6 mil polyethylene sheeting as a core item in every household emergency preparedness kit. The United States military has incorporated plastic sheeting into field expedient shelter doctrine for decades. The material works. It has always worked. The knowledge Marcus carries in his hands and his instincts is the same knowledge encoded in international humanitarian shelter standards. But when a housed person deploys it, it is called emergency preparedness. When Marcus deploys it, people pull out their phones and laugh. That is not Marcus's failure. That is a failure of perception. And perception is something we can choose to correct. Now let me give you something concrete, because this is not just Marcus's story. This knowledge belongs to you. The easiest entry point is simply this. Add 6 55-gallon contractor bags to whatever emergency preparedness kit you already have. Not grocery bags, contractor bags. Minimum 3 mil thickness, preferably the 3.2 mil heavy-duty black variety at any hardware store. Each bag, cut along one fold seam and the bottom edge, and there becomes a flat sheet roughly 5.5 feet by 6 feet. 2 sheets overlapped and pitched give you enough waterproof coverage for one adult. Cost, under $3 total. Zero maintenance, essentially unlimited shelf life when stored out of direct sunlight. Keep one rolled in the bottom of your pack if you camp. Keep 2 folded into a Ziploc bag in your car emergency kit. You have just added a functional waterproof shelter to your preparedness setup for the price of a cup of coffee. If you want to go further, build one in your backyard on a dry afternoon before you ever need it in real conditions. String a ridgeline between 2 fixed points at about 4 feet of height. Cut your contractor bags flat and drape them over the ridgeline. Upper sheet over lower sheet, 6 inches of overlap. On working from the bottom edge upward the way a roofer works. Anchor the base edges with rocks placed along the outside of the plastic. Never poke rope through the material, because every hole is a tear waiting to happen under wind stress. When you are done, run a garden hose over it for 5 full minutes at the peak and watch the water move. You will be genuinely surprised. Nothing enters, nothing pools. The geometry does the work the material was always capable of doing. And if all you want right now is a quick test for gear you already own, pour 2 inches of water onto a flat section of your tent floor or rain fly and let it sit undisturbed for 30 minutes. If you see any moisture transferring to the underside of the material, your hydrostatic head rating is not performing as labeled, and you have just learned something important before a storm taught it to you the hard way. Marcus was an engineer. He just never had the title, the salary, or the drafting table. He had the rain, the need, and the patience to learn what the rain was actually doing. And he built a system precise enough to survive what the products failed. Not a product, a system. And systems, when they are built correctly, do not fail. The men who laughed at him on day 1 were knocking on his shelter door by day 15, asking if there was room inside. The knowledge was never lost. It was buried under the assumption that the people who needed it most had nothing worth learning from. That is what this channel exists to correct, digging up what the modern market decided was not worth selling, because it was always too genuinely useful to disappear entirely. If that is the kind of truth you want more of, subscribe. We are investigating the materials, the methods, the systems, and the people that industry wrote off. And we are bringing all of it back into the light. Tell us in the comments what forgotten skill or overlooked knowledge you want us to investigate next. We read every single one.